Before we started, we were all like, should we just ask him how he would have voiced Stellan Geos drowning? And then just like, I don't know. That's kind of a sore subject. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they both.
Sorry, spoiler.
I mean, the book's been out for what, 2 years?
Yeah. No, we're
Come on.
The Emperor has foreseen a new threat rising against him. The Podwans Podcast.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome in today for the 113th episode of the Podwans Podcast. I am your host, Char J, joined by my co-host Luke at Jedi Master Eggs and Hereth at Hereth Productions. Today, we have a very special guest coming on our show. He is a voice actor, director, narrator, and most importantly, a Star Wars fan. Please welcome Marc Thompson.
Good.
How are you?
Great. I didn't know you were gonna bust out the Stellan Geos hilt. I would have gotten mine.
Yeah, before we came in here, they each had a High Republic object, and I didn't have one because
no
Luke had
way.
nubs.
Oh,
and
that's
he had,
so great.
Yeah, he had the Stellan Geo saber.
Oh, that's awesome. Where'd you get the hat?
So it came with the exclusive paper, not paperback, but the hardcover for
Like
what
one of the
is Fallen Star?
Goldsboro ones?
Yeah, Fallen Star. Yeah, for Fallen Star it came out with
wow.
those. So
I've
yeah,
never seen
yeah,
that. That's great.
yeah, it's awesome.
All right, well,
John?
let's get the show going. As we do for every show, we have an icebreaker question. So as a Star Wars podcast, I am a huge Empire Strikes Back fan. Luke loves the Clone Wars, and Hereth's obsessed with the Thrawn novels.
Ooh.
So what is your favorite Star Wars show, movie, and book? It could be a book that you have worked on or have not worked on.
Like movie, my all-time favorite Star Wars movie is Empire. Just Yoda is the GOAT of all time, and I love Yoda, and especially in that movie. Show, gosh, I really don't know. I mean, I guess just if I'm approaching it from a fan standpoint, Fallen Star or Rising Storm might be, just from a fan perspective, one of my favorite, just because I'm a big Jedi fan, and like I know I'm supposed to say this because I work on narrating the books, but I genuinely love the High Republic. Like I just think that it's been so fascinating to see how different Jedi perceive the Force in different ways, and I love just that the idea of like the Nile being the foil for the Jedi and them being just all anarchy and chaos, and like just what an interesting antagonist that is for the idea of what the Jedi stand for. And so I guess just purely from a fan perspective, I love the High Republic, and it would be a pretty close tie between Fallen Star and Rising Storm, just because I really love those two.
Yeah, and as you
I
mentioned,
love them all though. I love them all. All the authors are amazing. Everybody's amazing.
And as you mentioned, the High Republic.
Yes.
I mean, you voiced characters in Star Wars before. Obviously, Thrawn. It's a specific character, but with High Republic, it's an entirely new era of the franchise.
Yeah.
And so I just want to ask you, what is your mindset going into voicing new characters in a vast story like the High Republic?
Yeah. It was definitely a little intimidating because, at least when I'm doing legacy characters, I kind of have the crutch of being able to rely on, well, what's been done in the films before, what's been done in the shows before. So to be kind of, with the exception of like maybe Yoda or Tara Sinube, like, kind of having to start totally from scratch, was like, oh man, like this is intimidating. And there were so many of them. Luckily with the High Republic, they had this amazing concept art that they came out with. And I kind of got an early peek at, they've released them as the different phases have come out, but I got to see them before the books came out, of like these concepts art of the different Jedi and things like that. So I drew a lot of inspiration from that. And then definitely like the authors are always so great at describing them and kind of really painting the picture of just attitudinally what these characters are like, and kind of what their thought process is like, and what they look like. And I spend a lot of time on Wikipedia anytime there's a species, and I try to like, is there anything on this alien that maybe I could use as an anchor for a vocal choice, or so a lot of that. So
yeah, so I mean, obviously the biggest one with the High Republic is Markion Rowe.
Hmm.
What mindset did you bring into with Markion Rowe? Like, how were you going to voice him? Like, were you trying out different voices, or did the one that you had just stick? Because when I hear it, I'm just like, it's the creepiest thing ever.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. No, I was definitely experimenting. It was a couple things. It was like part of the motivation behind it was there's a lot of like, British bad guys in Star Wars. So and I knew that this was going to be a new era, and I kind of wanted to avoid that, that trope, because it's just been used a lot, and I knew I wanted to make him different. And then part of it was like there was some paragraph that Charles wrote that almost described him as like a shark, like it was like this gray skin, black eyes, and it was kind of like this, like, very like subtle and quiet until it's time to strike, and then when he strikes, and there was something about the way there was one line that Charles described. It was almost like a whisper or something. So then I started kind of playing around with almost like a Malkovich, or like a kind of a weird, like very quiet, subtle, until it was time to like, be Jaws and like come out. And so I like that idea of like this. And also like too, it was like in Light of the Jedi, he starts off as kind of, like this the guy who's just controlling the path drives, or he's almost like, I described him at one point as like the space Uber, like he's like,
No, yeah.
where do you want to go? And so like I wanted something that when you first heard him, he could just be considered almost like this meek, underling, so that when that twist comes, that it's more of a surprise, because he seems so unassuming at first. So yeah, there was a lot of those things.
No, absolutely. Like, it's just the way, like, like, I just got goosebumps when you started doing that. Just crazy. Oh, it's so awesome.
Well, thank you.
And in terms of Markion, was there any like favorite scene that stuck out to you? Because like I remember in Light of the Jedi when he was like spinning load and saber around, and that was like the moment where I was like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" Like,
Yeah,
there was
yeah.
a moment like that with Markion where you're just like, "Oh my god."
The one that I really freaked me out when I think it's I can't remember exactly what leads up to it, but when he decides to take out Kosiv, and he's like, Kosiv, you forgot your hand. I was like, ooh, like, like, 'cause it was just so brutal and like such like, oh my gosh, like, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, that was kind of the moment in the book where I was like, oh, like, this guy is really brutal.
And keeping kind of like, if you had to rank between Palpatine, like, who are the villains that you love to narrate?
Oh wow.
Like, whenever you get the opportunity to voice, you're like, ooh, let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Palpatine's probably number one, just because he's so, deliciously evil, and like, and then that has the nostalgia factor for me, just, being genuinely afraid of that guy growing up, and and like, what he represents, and so I think that one's probably up there. I mean, Vader is obviously fun, although they put some processing on it, but I try to get down as low as I can, like so
Yeah.
but they those guys are pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you broke into it a little bit with the Vader thing. So obviously you've done a lot of work outside of Star Wars audiobooks, and even in the same realm of Star Wars, you've done like Vision. So what are some of the differences between doing audiobook narration versus voice acting, and how does the preparation change between the two mediums?
yeah, that's a great question. They kind of vary from genre to genre, because like animation is really interesting because it's shorter bursts. So like I might be in the booth for an hour or so, or sometimes like a half hour, depending on the size of your part. And generally speaking, for animation, unless it's a prelay show, meaning they're animating to what we're doing, most of the time, the first time I'm reading the script for animation is when I am in the booth. And like, that's like, they're like, here, read this. I'm like, okay. And so you get a few takes, and they'll kind of try to make it make sense in the show. And there's some differences between if you're doing a prelay versus doing like a dubbing show like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, because then you have the animation to play off of. But with audiobooks, because you're telling the whole story and you're not just playing your character, you really have to like understand. You have to understand where the story is going to go. So you have to kind of know what's going on. So I'm usually I'm always reading those, cover to cover in the beginning, at least once through. And then kind of as I'm working on the characters, I'm going through different scenes over and over again and things like that. And obviously it's a lot more labor intensive when you're actually recording it, because a lot of the productions end up being, 10, sometimes 12 or 15 hours long. So that's usually like a 2 or 3 to 1 ratio of how long it takes to record. So like if it's 10 or 12 hours finished, then it probably took, 30 or 40 hours to record. So like you're in the booth, early in the morning till late at night for about a week, and just, so it's a lot more labor intensive, and your voice gets tired, and you're kind of trying to come up with a lot of different voices, and as opposed to just doing one character. And then obviously there's different styles for if you're doing commercial voiceover, or kind of live action dubbing, that there might be things that are more subtle. And if you're doing animation, it might be more broad. And then for my style of audio, like there's different approaches people have to audiobooks. Some people want the narration to be very kind of subtle, and they just want the words to kind of be the main driver of things. And for a lot of the Star Wars books, we've kind of settled on more of almost like a radio play style approach, like really trying to dramatize it and do a lot of different
Yes.
character voices, and even in the narration, putting a little bit more of a point of view in the narration. And a lot of that's coming from Kevin Thompson, who kind of directs most of the adult Star Wars novels. And I owe a lot to, just because he basically taught me how to do audiobooks. So
Yeah.
so there's a lot of different approaches, but that's kind of the approach we settled on. And
Oh, so within all the audiobooks, the television shows that you've done, the video games and anime that you have voiced, are there any characters that you've portrayed in those that you're really fond of?
Yeah. I mean, I got to do Casey Jones on the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was a fan of the original Ninja Turtles, so getting to do that was kind of a big deal for me. And I liked his sense of humor. I loved, when he got to kind of be the tough guy and Gogula, go bash the purple dragons and stuff. It wasn't as well known a show or as popular, but there was a show called G.I. Joe Sigma 6 that I got to do, and I was like Cobra Commander and Destro and Zartan, probably for the same reasons. I just was really into that because I grew up on those shows. But, my passion, my love is Star Wars and Star Trek. And so the fact that I get to do the Star Wars audiobooks is probably the thing I'm most proud of and most fond of. And just one of my best friends makes fun of me because like I've gotten to do Broadway, I've gotten to do cartoons, I've gotten to do commercials and stuff, and the first thing on my resume is like Star Wars audiobooks. And he's like, dude, like casting directors care a lot more about this Broadway play than they do Star Wars. Yeah, but it's Star Wars, and I'm like,
Yes.
So, all right.
Absolutely. You were literally living like, because that's if we could put our podcast to be like and have it be like the same vein, like that's what I totally admire you for that, because it's like we would be doing the same thing if we were able to. So you know what I mean? It's it's just so awesome to have like the effort that you put into it. You can really, really, really tell.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's just perfect.
Yeah. And you spoke of like this fondness for the Star Wars audiobooks, like obviously putting it at the top of your resume. So is there any specific project you've collaborated with that you take personal pride in?
Oh, I mean, a lot of them. I mean, obviously the Star Wars audiobooks. It was a big deal to me to get. It was a very, very small part, but I got. You mentioned earlier, I got to do one of the episodes of Star Wars Visions. And I was a 3-headed drummer in Tatooine Rhapsody, and but that was a huge deal to me because, like, I was just so excited to kind of be in Star Wars animation. So my good friend Mike got me into that, and he directed those, and so I was very, very excited to get to do that. I'm very proud of that. I've recently, over the past like year and a half, 2 years, started doing more of the convention circuit, and there's been a lot of interest in some of like the cartoons I've done, like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff like that. And I wasn't like, if I'm being totally honest, like when I was recording those, it felt more like, oh, this is just a job. I'm just kind of, I'll take whatever work I can get. But it's been really heartwarming to kind of hear what those shows have meant to other people. Like for some people, those shows are what Star Wars is to me. Like it was part of their childhood. It was something inspiring to them. It was something nostalgic and something that brought them a lot of joy. And so in that sense, I'm very proud to have been a part of those shows, because even though I wasn't a fan of those shows, like, you know, in the sense that they were around when I was a kid or I grew up with them, but like knowing that I'm a part of something that has made people feel happy or have some joy or connect or whatever has been really fun and exciting. And so in that sense, I've been really honored to be a part of those projects and see how, you know, that they've meant something to somebody.
So when you talk about conventions, I vividly remember in Celebration 2022 in Anaheim, me, Luke, Hereth, and then a few other people were in line for the High Republic panel at the Twin Sun stage. And I remember, I think that you were in front of us in the line. You were wearing
no
your
way.
robes. And I remember, I was like, oh my God, that's Marc Thompson. And then we go inside, and then you see Charles Soule, you see Claudia Gray, you see DJO, you see everyone on stage. And that was when we found out about Path of Deceit,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Battle of Jeddah, the Nameless, and all of these new characters.
Yeah.
And it was just so cool because, like, we see you there all the time, and it's like it feels cool to know that you're one of us.
Oh,
Really,
cool. Yeah.
you're just in the crowd with everyone and just being a fan. It's
Yeah,
it's
no,
fun.
and I feel I kind of have to pinch myself all the time to remember that I get to be a part of it, because sometimes it doesn't seem real. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. You know, so
No,
yeah,
yeah.
because there's certain times I've gotten, like, sometimes they'll have me up on the panel with those guys, and it's funny because like I would have been in that panel if I weren't on the dais. I would be there because I'd want to know what's going to happen, you know. So I feel very blessed to get to be a part of it. So.
I'm pretty sure that we had, well, one of our English friends was with us. It was his first ever convention, which was hilarious. I think he came up to you and was like, "Can you please do Thrawn?" And then you did it, and it's like you changed his entire life. So
All
it's just it is really fun. So I mean, also kind of talking about like your fandom, like was like not only Star Wars, but was there something else that was also kind of big growing up? Maybe
Oh,
like Lord of the Rings or something that you had really gotten into?
yeah, like I always feel weird telling Star Wars fans this, but like before I've always loved both. But like kind of middle school, high school, I was more of a Trekkie than I was a Star Wars fan. You know, which I know that there's sometimes rivalry there, but yeah, like my dad is a engineer and a scientist, and that was kind of one of the ways that we bonded, and you know, we would kind of talk about the episodes and stuff like that, and I still love Star Trek to this day, but Star Wars has kind of switched positions with it. But yeah, I used to go to Star Trek convention. I still do when I'm able to, but I've gone to Star Trek conventions. My first ever trip to New York City was I went to a Star Trek convention, and was very excited about that. And so I've met, like, you know, got Leonard Nimoy's autograph and Patrick Stewart's autograph and Jonathan Frakes and a bunch of people, and George Takei, and so I was a big, and still am a big Trekkie. So, and then, you know, I kind of casually was into G.I. Joe and Transformers and
Yeah,
a lot of the other 80s stuff. So yeah.
So is that like the next big thing of like, if Star Trek were to do like an audiobook series, you'd be like, "Yep, sign me up. Please,
Well, yeah,
please do it."
they've got some great audiobooks already, actually. I think Simon & Schuster does them, and I think his name is Robert Petikoff, or I get his last name wrong, but he's awesome. But I would be honored and would love to do a Star Trek book as well, but I think they've got a lot of Star Trek narrators already.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, I would love to do a Star Trek audiobook, because I do love Star Trek, and I'm loving Strange New Worlds. It's probably my favorite of the shows out right now. And Discovery's great, and yeah, so it was awesome.
Yeah, and I guess, how does it feel to be narrating longtime fan favorite books in Star Wars, like Michael Stackpole's Rogue Squadron series, and of course, obviously, we talk about Thrawn, Heir to the Empire.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Like, it's funny because, like, with the whole, like, the fact that I'm doing audiobooks is really weird to me, because in high school, I was the guy who never really read the book for the book report. I would go out and try to find the movie and, you know, do that. Yeah.
That was me.
I feel like, you know, like God's like, you didn't do your homework in high school. Now you have to do it now. I was like, oh, I gotta read all these books.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like Heir of the Empire specifically, that was the one time that I went out and bought a book on my own and started reading it because I was like, well, I got to know what happens. But then my lazy teenager kicked in and I never finished the book. So it was like hilarious to me that I then got hired and I got to like finish. I go, oh, this is what happened. Okay, cool. And then now it's been really cool because a lot of the Legends books that we're going back and recording. I mean, I don't have anything officially, but like my sense is that a lot of people were kind of begging for that and asking for that, and Penguin Random House saw that and they're like, okay, let's do that. So it's been really cool because I've been hearing from a lot of fans online just like how much they love those stories, and they never got an unabridged audio version. So the fact that we're able to go back now and do that with Kevin and Paul do with the music and the sound effects has been so exciting because like people are really enjoying them, and it's fun. Like, and what's really cool too is like seeing how certain ideas from those books were the seeds that are now being used to inspire some choices in some of the shows and the future films and things like that. Like I just got to do Outbound Flight and Survivor's Quest, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I was like, oh, that's kind of like what they did with Balin and Hati, and like, oh, that's interesting, and then I'm obviously the Rogue Squadron books have been great, and then I just Wednesday finished recording I, Jedi, which is kind of Corran Horn's kind of when he first sets out with Luke to train, and there's so much in that one that I was like, oh, this is similar to what they're doing with Sabine. And like, and like, there's it's really been cool to kind of go back and see some of those old ideas and how they're kind of using them for inspiration. And obviously they're just incredibly well written. And like when we were doing the Rogue Squadron books, like there was all this stuff about the Krytos virus. And it was written way before COVID, but I was like, there's so much that applies. Like, it's like, is there a time machine? Like, how did he know? Like, so it was amazing. Yeah. So, and they're really great stories. So, it's been awesome. It's been really, really cool.
Yeah, speaking of moments of like Legends inspiration, now the current books at the moment, there was a moment in the Force Awakens novelization that really stood out to me over the years. It's when Rey is circling around Kylo Ren. I remember listening to the audiobook version of this, and you pulled out a Palpatine voice. Was it just like a moment, like while you were like reading the script, going, "Oh, I'm gonna pull this out"? And now, how do you view it with the later context that now Palpatine returned in The Rise of Skywalker?
Right. Honestly, I can't totally remember. I kind of feel like there was something in the text that made me think that that's what was happening. And what's interesting with The Force Awakens, especially, is I read that and recorded that before the film had come out. So I think we were working off of, like, obviously the novelization was maybe working off of earlier drafts of the script or before things were edited that might have been actually, because obviously, I mean, there were maybe hints that is where they wanted to go, but they didn't want to tip their hat too soon. So maybe they tried to like distract people with Snoke or whatever, so I'm pretty sure that was something in the book itself that made me think. It was never said explicitly, but I had done the Aftermath books. And there was a lot in Chuck Wendig's books that indicated that Palpatine was still going to be around. Like there was a lot of things in his backup plan that kind of, so I kind of had in my mind that that's probably where this was going to go. So I think that was part of the thinking behind it and the choice, and I know people, have lots of different opinions. I like the sequel trilogy, and I personally think the novelizations, for people that have problems with the sequel trilogy, there's a lot in the novelizations that actually, I think, help explain some of the problems people had, like in terms of like, well, how is Rey able to be so competent in the Force? And like, there's a lot in the books that talk about when Kylo goes in to probe her mind, it was almost like a two-way door opened and she could kind of go into his. And there were certain things that she was able to access about his training in the Force that she was able to take with her that I thought were really interesting. And there's a lot of, there's just a lot of details that were filled in. And even some of the stuff about somehow Palpatine returned, like in the books leading up to the novelizations, but also the novelizations themselves, there's a lot of great backstory in there that really goes into much greater detail that's not anybody's fault. It's just books have more time to explore those details, whereas a 2-hour film doesn't have time to do that. So I don't know. Another reason to maybe check out the books, but because
Yes.
to me there's a lot in there that really was a lens for me to watch the films through that made me enjoy the films even more than I would have if I had not. So
Yeah, and I mean, also, I feel like the number one, because one of our first TikToks that I ever did was somebody was complaining about how Rey had stolen the name of Skywalker, and it's like I pulled up the narration towards the end because it's like you see the monologue between Luke and Leia, and them saying it's okay, take it, like
yes,
she
yeah,
doesn't steal it, and it's so interesting that was a choice that they made, but
yeah,
didn't keep it in the film. Which I
yeah,
feel like it would have worked for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And it's just so great how the books themselves are able to bring more to the conversation and give you
totally,
more in depth, especially for those films, because obviously there's speculation of stuff of it not being all together, but who knows about that. But
right.
I feel like if a lot of people were to get into the books, they wouldn't have these questions.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and I forget, it might have been Sam Witwer, or somebody has said, it's been said several times that the solution for any problems you have with Star Wars is more Star Wars, because it's like what the Clone Wars did for the prequels
Yes.
is what, I have a feeling that, like, cuz there's, they make you, like, the Clone Wars made you appreciate Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship on an even deeper level. Like, the films I think are great, but the Clone Wars enhances it even more. And then when you get into the comics and the books and, like, so much of that stuff, where you have time to explain some of those, quote unquote plot holes, even though they're not necessarily plot holes, but
Yeah.
it does help you appreciate it even more, and it provides more opportunities for more storytelling, and so yeah, I think it's great for that reason. Yeah.
With all of the lines that you have done in audiobook narration, not just Star Wars, but it could be
Mm.
anything. What was a moment in your narration career that you really felt you nailed the line? That emotion and or the delivery was just perfect.
Oh man. I mean, the most honest answer is I never really feel that way. Like,
Yeah.
I always end up doing like 3 or 4 takes, and then Kevin, the director, will be like, "We had it on this first one, or we had it on the second one." I'm like, "All right, fine, sorry." So because I'm always second guessing and doubting if it's good enough, and I always want to do more takes, but we never have time because we'd be there. I'd still be in the booth if we did all the takes I want to do. So especially with the books, it's like there's so much to do. A lot of times you have to, like, Kevin says this thing off to me, like, we can't be so precious about every little thing because we just won't have time. So you have to kind of just trust it after a while and go. And so, yeah, the most honest answer is I never feel like I'm nailing it. I always feel like, oh, I wish I had another take. So
Oh man, and I mean, you've gone through a whole bunch of novels, Star Wars novels, and become synonymous with certain character portrayals. Is it safe to say that you've grown to like in any type of an attachment or relationship with any of those characters?
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, several of them. I mean, I think I'm I'm kind of weird because, like, I'm always like, my kids will make fun of me for this too, but I always kind of want to be the good guy. Like, I'm always like, I'm kind of so, like, so
Yeah.
doing Thrawn at first, I was like, oh, it's this weird that he's the bad guy. But, like, but there is this thing about the way Timothy Zahn writes him, where he's not, like, it's a cliche to say, well, no bad guy thinks they're the bad guy, but with Thrawn, it kind of really is true. It's like he's really just more
Yeah.
utilitarian, and like, Timothy Zahn writes him in this way where there's so many noble qualities about him, in terms of, how he chooses to lead his people, and there's no bad idea, and it's a true meritocracy in the sense that, like, the good idea is the thing that's most important, not who came up with it or what rank, or and so I definitely have become pretty. I've gotten to do, what is it now? Maybe it's like 9 or 6, maybe 8. I can't remember the exact, but I've done a bunch of Thrawn books, and so I feel like I've really started to understand kind
His
of
character.
him. Yeah, I kind of, so in a weird way, I feel guilty saying it, but, like, I kind of like, like, connect with the bad guy. I'm like, oh no, I'm the bad guy. But he's he's more of a utilitarian. So like we'll see how he gets used in Ahsoka and stuff, because you kind of need a true
Yeah.
antagonist,
Yeah.
but I really admire his, the way he approaches things and the way he thinks and his calm, cool, and collected and stuff. So yeah. And then like on the other extreme, I think I did really connect to Stellan Gios.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because
wah, wah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what gets you being the good guy, but I think like that, like his whole like wanting to be the best and be this example, but then the pressure he puts on himself about wanting to be the example, and then how the kind of the pitfalls of perfectionism maybe, and wanting to do that. So like there was a lot in that book that I really connected with. And then I don't know if I'm rambling too much about this, but then like
No.
also
No,
like
we could sit here and listen to you talk for hours. Are you kidding me?
Yes.
no, because I think I can struggle with that sometimes. It's like I can make an idol out of being good or being the best,
Yeah.
and then you put so much pressure on yourself that you end up falling short, and then you doubt things, so anyway, there was a lot in there for that for me. And then there was also in which is the one where Elzar's training with
Rising Storm with Orla Jorlani.
Yes. There was a scene in there where I had a health scare a couple years ago, and I had to go to the hospital, and I had to have an MRI done. And there's a scene where she's teaching him how to meditate in the ocean, and just the waves are hitting him, and he's almost drowning. But like the way that Claudia described, having to kind of ground himself and just trust and just allow the wave to go through him. Like right before I had to go into the MRI, I like got nauseous and I started to throw up. And this was like the third time this test was supposed to happen, and they were like, "Okay, we'll just wheel you back to." And I was like, "No, we've got to do this test," because like I did not want to be in the hospital any longer. And so like I used that scene as a way to like kind of mentally process like having to sit still in the MRI and just not dealing with the nausea and it was just, but there was something about that scene of him doing the headstand in the water and the waves and having to get through that kind of helped me through it in a weird way. So I connected on that way as well. So that was kind of cool. So
no, but like, isn't it so fascinating how we use Star Wars in like daily stuff? Like for like how you were explaining like that being very impactful to something that you had gone through as well. And I feel like sometimes we take Star Wars for granted, especially because it's like like Star Wars is meant to be not real life in to say, but you're supposed to be able to relate to the characters.
Yeah. 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like if it's you with Elzar or Markion Ro or just maybe a character. Other question. Sorry, getting off on a tangent. How was it doing Geode? Just like what was the mindset of like going with Geode and just being like, man, this guy is a rock. That is a player.
Oh, yeah. I mean, by far the hardest character to narrate. No, it was awesome. I mean, I love Claudia Gray is incredible. And I that whole, it's just awesome. I love, I love all the, like the different ways that she could describe the emotion on his face. And like, it's just brilliant. It's just such a great literary choice.
I guess then talking about another sentient being, Burry, and specifically the Wookiee sound.
Yeah.
So I know they did for I think one of the Star Wars books, they actually put in the growling. And then was it something that you had kind of been like, hey, I want to take a shot at? And like, how did that come about? Because you do it perfectly. Like, it's so great.
You notice they don't do that in any other books, though. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was in there. Like, it was like, it was written, like it had the
Yeah.
RRRAAAGG, so I was trying to honor what was on the page and do it, and it felt a little silly in the moment, but like you just kind of had to go through it, and I think I tried to kind of convey the emotion, and like because I think it might have been in Light of the Jedi where like they would do like the I am sorry, like it would like they put the actual words in the middle of the rah rah roo ya. So it was a little challenging to try to do that, and we were chuckling a little bit in the booth when it was happening, but I did my best. I did my best.
No, yeah. And kind of going off of Burry, have any fates of the certain characters that you've have any of like the certain fates that have happened to these characters caught you by surprise?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was I mean, I know we were joking about spoilers, but I mean, people know, but like, I was pretty shocked that they killed off Stellan. I was like, what? Like,
Oh, trust me.
I thought
Yeah.
like, Stellan and Elzar and Avar were the Han, Luke, and Leia. So to kill off him, you know, pretty early on in the story, I was like, oh my gosh, like they are not pulling any punches. And I was genuinely sad about that. I was like, like doing the
Yeah.
funerals scene, I was like kind of getting misty eyed, and I was like, man, and especially because that was the guy I was relating to. I was like, oh, bye, so, and then,
No.
it was scary. There were a couple people because like I was trying to think who else passed. Like they killed off quite a few people. I was like kind of like, oh my gosh, they're really getting rid of people
Yes.
here. So um,
Orla.
that's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And she was another one that I thought, oh, this character is really cool. And I love the idea of a Wayseeker. And it's like, I wonder what they're going to do with it. Oh, I guess not. Okay. Nothing, so.
I guess I don't have to. I guess I don't have to do her voice anymore. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
shame.
And didn't, I forgot her name. The Shield girl die as well?
Yeah,
Oh.
oh man, I can't think of the name.
Sh-
But no, there
Something
is
with an S,
somebody
right?
else. There's another Jedi Master that's with
It's
Orla when they get
it's
attacked
Burry's
by the
master, I
Nameless.
believe, right?
Yes, Burley's Master gets
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
taken
yeah.
out as
That's right. That's
well.
right. Yes, 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 yeah. So, yeah. So
Yes,
there's,
and then
yeah.
yeah, and Burry's just like he feels that the way you that book in particular, like the way you narrated and did all the just like how Burry feels. Like you can
Oh,
sincerely feel the anguish, and especially in Light of the Jedi when you were doing that scene with when they're all trying to keep things together and Burry's like freaking out and then the master kind of takes over.
wow. Yeah.
Is there like a specific mindset that you go into, like being a mentor to? Because I know it's just you in the booth. Like, how do
Right.
you deal with those different relationships between characters?
Well, thank you for saying that. It's a lot of kind of actory stuff. It's like just trying to, I guess my specific approach is trying to kind of really imagine those scenarios and really imagine what I would be feeling or how I would react or how the character would react to those situations and that sense of loss. And I think, like as I've gotten older, I've lost people. My mother has passed away. I've had mentors pass away. I've had friends pass away. So there's some things I can kind of draw on personally to think about that. I've been, I have two boys and they're, 21 and 18 now. So I've gone through times of trying to mentor them or trying to teach them things and like, maybe them sometimes not want to hear what I have to say or that kind of that you know um teacher student, not that like my kids are students, but that kind of trying to being in an older
No.
position, trying to pass on something to and how desperately you want that to happen, but you have to let someone have their own free will and choice. And sometimes I'm thinking of those types of experiences and applying them. Sometimes I'm just purely imagining. Sometimes it's like when you're doing the marking on row scenes or, the big, bad guy scenes, you're kind of imagining, if you weren't have any, kind of moral restraints, like, how,
Yeah.
sometimes a little bit of fantasizing, like what I'd like to say to that parking attendant, you forgot your hand, like, like, so like, but so yeah, you just draw on all kinds of different things. But like for me, I mean, when I record, I'll like turn all the lights out. I like the booth is totally dark. It's just the iPad. And I try to kind of like get as much tunnel vision on the story as much as possible and just eliminate any and all distractions and try to just, I'll gesture a lot, and sometimes I get in trouble because I'll make noise in the booth or whatever. But I'll really kind of try to kind of be actually acting this stuff out as I'm doing it, and to help me really get into it. So
Yeah.
For sure. And you mentioned the whole bury angle with how like you have to do the roars and then the in between sentences. Like I'm generally curious as like a person who consumes a lot of Star Wars audiobooks, has the authors ever give you notes like, I want the character to sound like this, or like certain like little scene directions that the director doesn't usually give you before you start reading?
for me, no. And I think part of that is, I mean, I've definitely seen that happen. But I think at a certain point, at least with the Star Wars books, there's a point where it can become too many cooks in the kitchen, because you've got me, you've got the director Kevin Thompson, you've got the audio engineer, you've got the producers, and then there's like obviously choices for the characters in this particular book, but then a different author is going to pick up the story either before this book or after this book. And there's certain characters that, might be very similar to this author's suggestion or not, isn't going to play well with another character that's already been established beforehand in a book before or a book that's coming up after. So at a certain point, I think that the thinking is we got to let the director direct. And so if we in order to make it all kind of come together, like Kevin had this great example once about the it's like in an orchestra, and like we have to make sure that all the instruments are actually working together. And this instrument might make a really cool sound or have a really cool solo, but if it's pulling away from the entire piece of music, then it doesn't serve the overall story. So like we got to make sure that all the so it's not that I'm closed off to those ideas or not want to hear it, but I just it's just the way this particular process is working. It's a little bit more like I don't want to go to Kevin and say, well, Claudia said that it needs to be that, because then it causes these like fights or and like and sometimes I have choices that get shot down, and and sometimes he have suggestions and I'm like, oh yeah, that is a better idea. And so we kind of work it out that way. And but honestly, like the main way that authors get their notes in is through the book itself, because like most of the time the book will say they spoke with an accented basic, or they spoke very precisely, or their voice was crisp, or their voice was harsh, or their voice was gentle, or so like there's all these descriptions that the authors put in there, so it becomes pretty clear. There's some variance in there, but it's pretty clear what they're going for when you read the book. So there's not a huge need to say, hey, but again, like if I give a certain character a certain accent or a certain tone of voice, a lot of those choices are because I'm trying to figure out how in the audio production they're all going to stand out from each other and be distinct enough so the listener can tell who's different or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned before this that you were having the teacher-student moment with your kids, and then the moment where you needed some Star Wars inspiration when you were, having your medical issue. For the past few months, my mom's been battling cancer. I just found out the other day that she won. She won her fight.
Hey, that's awesome.
Love it.
So throughout that time, whenever I would like continue thinking about it, I would cling on to Yoda's teachings, just listening to Yoda in my head. Just
wow.
Like unlearn what you've learned, clear your mind, focus on what's right here and now.
Yes.
And is there a moment like that where you resonate with?
Oh, I mean, so many.
Like the most.
Well, okay. I mean,
Really putting them on the spot.
Yeah. I will not settle for anything but the most inspiring. I think. I mean, well, okay. So like the probably the biggest one is I have you probably can't see it very well, but there's a tattoo I have here of Yoda.
No, yeah.
It says luminous beings, and there's a scripture in there that talks about how we are jars of clay, and that like it's not it's kind of like the spirit is what's most important, and it's like so when Yoda says luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, it's like it's the idea that like it's what's on in the inside that's most important, not all the other stuff, and to not get too caught up in in the outward appearance of things, or and I think that whole scene is my favorite scene in all of Star Wars, when he lifts the X-wing and Luke's having such a hard time with it, and it's just this idea that the fact that you think it's impossible, that's why you fail, is that you're kind of you're leaning on your own understanding. You're relying on what you think can be done instead of relying on this bigger thing, this force that is infinitely more powerful than anything you have to offer. So like there's that. And then I'm so glad that your mom won that battle. Like my mom, when she was getting ready to pass away, there's this she passed, I think, before Last Jedi came out. And there's a scene when Luke goes up and kisses Leia on the forehead, and now I'm forgetting who says it. Like when they're talking about Han, and they're saying like no one's ever really gone. And I last time I got to see my mom, I had kissed her on the forehead like that, and I didn't. Sorry, I'm killing. But I didn't.
No, yeah.
I didn't know that was what Mark Hamill was going to do, and so it was just that ended up being an incredibly poignant moment for me. And then his words about no one's ever really gone ended up being something that I've kind of held on to and found comfort in, and
Yeah.
So speaking of that moment, I know you got to do the Last Jedi audiobook, obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
So when that moment happened, did you take that and no, this would have been before, correct? Because you said that
Right.
that you guys had done the audiobook before, right? Correct.
Now I'm trying to remember, actually. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
So what was that? So like when you did that in the booth, obviously this was before the film, after you saw it, like did that
Right.
even mean so much more that you had kind of had a feeling that's where that moment was going to go?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, yeah. And it was, and again, I was like, kind of, I'm sure that was all mixed in there. Yeah. So, yeah.
No, yeah, that's so awesome. Like what you get to do it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
It's just, oh man,
And
you're living our dream. Let me
and
just
I
say
noticed, and I noticed too, the tattoo that you have of that's the
Mhm.
exact same spot where Yoda grabbed Luke when he said that line.
Oh, no
And
way.
Like right on the right shoulder. Yeah. Not this crude method.
I did not think about that. That's awesome. That is so cool.
I thought maybe you
love that.
put it there for that specific reason. So,
No, I just heard it
Yeah.
was less painful.
No.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally gonna think about that now. That's so cool. Oh
Yeah.
wow, that's awesome.
Now we just need Mark to come in and do some lines for the trivia tournament and
Yes.
just
Oh, yeah.
but no, this has been great. I got one final question for you, Mark,
Yeah.
before we let you go. And thank you again for coming on. It means a lot. It's awesome to talk to somebody that is just as big as fans as we are, and it's such a great, like a fresh, what am I trying to say? Breath of fresh air to have somebody that loves the franchise but also gets to work in it and get to put that much effort into it. And we really appreciate your time. For a lot of Star Wars fans, you become a bit of an icon. Did you ever foresee becoming such an integral part of Star Wars?
No, like no, like it's. I'm very flattered by that. I don't know how true that is, but I'm very flattered by it. But I feel very honored that I am get to be a part of it in a small way, and it means a lot to me. So I'm just happy that people enjoy what we're doing, and yeah. So thank you.
I
For
mean,
saying-
yeah, for me, I'm very much, I can't read. Like I can read. I'm not illiterate, but
yeah.
audiobooks, cause kind of like you, I don't have the attention span to think of words and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when I first started getting into the audiobooks, you were the narrator.
Oh wow.
So I was like, okay, I like this voice. I like how he does this and that. So having you on has just been a complete and utter fantastic time for me, and I'm
Oh,
sure for
good.
the guys here too. But yeah, I really appreciate it. All right. Well, that's gonna be this episode of the Pawn Ones podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. But as always, may the force be with you.
Always.
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 See you guys.